Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter. That is Tim.
Yo yo. And special guest.
Special guest Garrus, my cat, who has decided that he wants to lie on my chest right this minute, despite the fact that he's been a menace and a pest. But he's too adorable to just throw away. Although the truth is I tried like 3 times and he just kept coming back, so I made my peace with it.
And of course, as we all know, you named your cat Garrus after Mick Garris, the director of Sleepwalkers.
That is completely factually incorrect, but I'll let you believe what you want, Tim. This is a horror movie podcast. We talk about horror movies on this show, and this is, of course, the Octoberthon. We are working through a bunch of bonus episodes, extra episodes, biggest Octoberthon ever. I have no idea at the time of recording how many we're going to end up with, but I'm shooting for a high number.
Oh.
Shooting for a high number.
At least 12.
The cat's also turned down my volume on my headphones, so you sounded really quiet to me for a second there. So, absolutely nothing but shenanigans. The cat is staying where he is. And I love that he's choosing this episode, because it's not like we're talking about a goofy movie. We're not talking about some schlocky B movie. This is the episode where we're going to talk about Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock Psycho from 1960. We will start spoiler free, I guess, and we'll give you warning somewhere in the middle before we go into spoilers. But that is the plan. We're going to talk about Psycho, and we are going to do the entire franchise over the course of the month. Well, the movies anyway. I'm not including Bates Motel in this. Before anyone thinks we're doing 100, TV reviews.
Although I have watched all of Bates Motel, so if anyone wants to know what I think about it, feel free to hit me up.
Sure, get Tim on Twitter at Tim Vergilish. Go and pester him over there. It's actually worth mentioning as well that this is actually kind of a remake of an old episode, because way back at the start of this show when we were really bad at this.
Oh, you meant a remake of Screams?
Yes, of our episode. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. I thought you meant like a remake of like a Hitchcock TV show or something. I was like, I didn't know that, but.
Yeah. We talked about this a long time ago, but that was back before we got good, and it was always an idea to redo some of those earlier episodes, especially for the big prominent movies like Psycho. Yeah. So
guess what? This episode, it's in color, and you're gonna get to see Pete jack off. So. Yeah, it's a Psycho, if you're not familiar with it, and you should be familiar with it. But, it is an old movie, and, I'm often shocked with people who are only 10 years younger than me who seem to know nothing about movies that are before the 80s or whatever. Despite the fact that it's kind of at the tail end of Hitchcock's career, and it's not right at the end. He was making movies throughout all the 60s, and he died in the 70s, but... Because the Birds came after this, which was another big one that people always mention. But I feel like that's kind of the last one that people talk about a lot. And now that the cat has moved, I can sit up properly, which is nice. It's the Birds is very much the last big classic Psycho movie. Big classic Hitchcock movie, because all the ones that came after that, people don't talk about as much. People don't really talk about Torn Curtain. They don't really talk about Marnie that much. Frenzy's not bad actually. Frenzy's the one kind of post Birds movie from him that I actually like, because he made some weak sauce in that last decade or so. Have you seen other Hitchcock movies, Tim? Have you only watched Psycho? Honestly, I haven't seen that many. I think really just Psycho and The Birds. I think that's it.
You watched the 2 that can be classified as horror and nothing else.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's pretty much it. Like, obviously, I know a lot of plot beats from other stuff, just through pop culture, doing parodies of Rear Window or stuff like that, but no, I actually really haven't seen that much. Who has the time? Well, I watch 50 movies for this show a week. Can't watch anything else.
Hey, I watched most of these Hitchcock movies before I ever met you, alright? You had a whole youth before you met me.
Sure. I don't even know what I was doing when I was younger. I forget.
But Hitchcock had obviously had a very illustrious career before this. He, like you say, Rear Window, Vertigo, bunch of classic Strangers in a Train, a lot of thrillers, a lot of kind of
tense suspense films, but not horror movies. And Psycho is very much a horror movie, and it was kind of this weird shift for him, because it was like, let's do something different, let's do something a bit more shocking. And one of the big things that I will talk about with this movie is how it kind of is the dawn of the modern horror film in a lot of ways, because before this film, horror was very much like, it was castles in Transylvania, it was supernatural things, it was all these different kind of ideas. And this was the movie that kind of said, no, we can do a horror with with a regular person set in a modern, for the time, a modern setting. It's a motel. It's a regular person who has regular, like, present day worries. It's just not someone in a cloak and like rich society from like the 1700s kind of thing.
I wonder if they did it today, if it would all take place at an Airbnb. That'd be the modern retelling.
Maybe. I mean, even the fact that it's black and white. The reason why it was in black and white is because the news was still in black and white in 1960. Most stuff had shifted to color, but the news hadn't. So the idea was to make it feel a bit more real. It's a very low budget movie as well, of course, compared to a lot of Hitchcock stuff. So, it's very much that it takes the horror away from the mythical, like, forgotten European lands and brings it into sort of modern day, Western culture. It's very much what Psycho does. And on top of that, it's also a very, for the time, shocking movie. There's definitely things in this movie where I'm watching, I'm going, yeah, for 1960, this feels quite raunchy, that they're even talking about this, or that they're even showing a woman walk about in a bra, or that they're,
And like, wasn't it kind of like the first movie where you don't want to get spoiled with it? Didn't Hitchcock? Because before, I think movies, people kind of just walked in and out of them, like, whenever, didn't matter like when they started. And I think this was like one of the first movies where they're like, no, you have to come right when the movie starts, and like they're not going to let new people in like halfway through the movie or whatever, because Hitchcock was very insistent on not having it be spoiled.
Yeah, he also had people go around and buy the book so no one could know what the ending is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
They tried to buy as many copies of the book as they could so that people wouldn't know what the ending was going to be.
This drives me crazy, because like the last couple of years I went on a little bit of a Psycho kick. Actually, watched all the movies. I watched Bates Motel, and I really do want to go back and read the book, but it's one of these things that drives me crazy where it's so hard to find like a copy of the book that doesn't have a cover from like the movie or from Bates Motel, the TV show. Like, it's so stupid. Like, that is one thing that really irks me. I hate these book covers that reference the movies and shit.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if would it be a book that we'd even be talking about now if Psycho never get made? Like,
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah,
would anyone care about it? So I guess that's the argument for why you just go with it. But I mean, obviously the movie's great. Like, I mean, I don't know if you even have to say that. Like, opening this, like, do you like Psycho? Of course you like Psycho. Don't you, Tim?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Oh my. I'm looking forward to this explanation.
Well, no, it's good. I don't know. I don't think it's I don't know. Maybe I don't love it as much as other people. Like, I get why it's a classic, and why it I guess maybe revolutionized horror from the time. And there's some stuff that I think still really stands up today. Like, the music is phenomenal, and it's very recognizable, very again, I don't know everything that was going on at this time, but it feels like this is probably like first kind of music that really, or the first movie that really kind of had this like heavy string kind of soundtrack and stuff to it. But I don't know. It's not one I feel like I come back to a lot and like rewatch a lot. There's some parts that kind of I don't know, drag a little bit for me, to be honest. But I mean, overall though, like the performances are great, and then the big kind of horror moments definitely in it are good. But yeah, it's not my favorite movie of all time though.
See, if you give this a rating equal to or lower than The Boy, I am going to riot at the end of this. Absolutely riot. I'm warning you now that will not go down well.
All right, well, we shall see.
No, Psycho's fantastic. Like, everything about it, like, it's such a confident film, and it makes sense it's confident because it's Hitchcock, but like everything about it sets up his characters, it sets up like a reason for tension, because it's almost like a weird twist in and of itself, that the first like 30 minutes or so actually treat it more like a traditional Hitchcock movie. It feels like a thriller about a woman who's stolen some money and is on the run. You know, it just feels like a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah.
And then it does the whole thing where she gets to the motel, we meet Norman Bates, and we have the famous shower scene, and it's like, no, this is something new, this is something different, this is a horror movie. And, you know, it goes from there. It's kind of a movie of two halves because of that, because it does the post, you know, shower scene half, I guess we'll call it. Maybe try to avoid spoilers for Psycho. Stupid, I don't know. Maybe it's just something everyone knows.
Yeah, I'm assuming most people know, but I mean, like you said, though, there are people that might be, you know, 10 years younger or something that, you know, might not really have seen it. But it's one of those things like Star Wars, though, where even if you haven't watched the movie outright, it's, you know, there's been done so much in pop culture that, you know, you most likely probably already know the twists and the most famous scenes and stuff.
So no, like I think there's you mentioned the performances. The performances in this are really good. Janet Leigh, who plays character's name,
Marianne,
yeah, there you go. She plays Marianne, and she like does so many little things with her reactions and body language in this movie. That sets it up with like her lover at the start of the movie, the way she interacts with Norman, like all of those scenes play so well because of the way she reacts. There's a scene earlier on where she's putting up with this rich asshole who comes into her place of work, because she works for a realtor who's selling a house to this guy, and the way she reacts to all of his weird like flirting and advances and kind of plays it off, and how different that is to her with her lover, or how different that is with her with Norman. Like there's such a range in a character where in a modern movie like this would be like, oh, this is just a character who's there to be killed, so she wouldn't have much characterization, she wouldn't have much going for her. And there's so much there. And then obviously Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates is really good. He's delightfully kind of like boyish and naive, you know, seeming until you get to the other stuff.
It's a really good range, and like you know, it's very interesting seeing this again. You know, I'm not really sure, you know, if it's something that had really been done up to this point. You know, I think it's something we see now, but just the, you know, dichotomy of, you know, this one way he's represented where he has this kind of like, oh shucks, oh gee, like, you know, like a Boy Scout kind of thing, and then, you know, the other stuff he's able to do throughout the movie. But it's really, really great performance.
Interestingly, apparently in the book, he wasn't like this, like this kind of like friendly, like unassuming guy. He was apparently more of a sleazy, like middle-aged dude in the book.
So a little bit more like you than in the movie.
How dare you? How dare you? So now, like, obviously those are the two actors that we talk about the most. What's interesting actually is that there's an actor in this who plays the private detective or the private investigator in the second half of the film. Martin Balsam, that actor, I literally just saw him in an episode of Mystery Science Theater like yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in a movie called Mitchell. It was not
Mitchell. Okay, it's a famous
Mitchell.
episode.
Yeah, it's Joel's last episode, which is why it's I think well known. But so it's just weird. I was like, wait a minute, I know him from something. He was in 12 Angry Men as well. He clearly was in a lot of great movies in the 60s and 50s. But hey, so no, I don't even know where to begin with this. I mean, I guess we just work through the movie and talk about how it does what it does. So I guess I'll give the full spoiler warning just in case at this point. But one of the things like I love about this movie is how much it gives to the characters, especially Marianne's character. Like or Marion, I keep saying Marion's character, who, like, we open the movie and she's with this boyfriend in a seedy hotel, which feels very kind of racy for the time period and the movies that were coming out. If you think about movies from the 50s like doing something like this, you wouldn't imagine it, you wouldn't see it in your head. She like immediately sets up some of the themes of the movie, which is how she deals with men and how men kind of treat her, and how that's kind of a running ongoing thing for the film, and how he seems to almost prefer it being this seedy secretive thing, even though they established that he's already divorced, that he's not married. Like, I think your assumption when you first like see them meeting in a hotel, that it's like, oh, he's cheating on his wife, but he's not. Like, he mentions that he's paying alimony like later in the scene. Like,
would even being divorced though, would that be kind of a taboo thing for the time?
It might be. I'm not. I mean, you're older than I am, Tim. So.
Oh, let me think. Yeah, I would have been around that back then.
Yeah. So yeah, like they set this up, and like it's not until she kind of gives him an ultimatum and kind of says, "No, there's going to be no more of this." That he kind of says, okay, we'll do something proper, we'll do something respectable in public. I'll even come and have dinner with you and your sister. Because in fact, hell, speaking of themes being set up, she mentions that, oh, you're going to, I want you to have dinner with me and my sister, and the photo of my dead mother, like, on the mantelpiece. And he cracks a joke about turning the photo around when he tries to turn it more into like sex talk. But again, I wanted to point that out because right away it sets up the idea of mothers being a theme of like the movie. And the idea of being ashamed of doing what she does in front of her mother, or even thinking about her mother when she's doing anything sexual, because clearly that this movie, if you know where it's going, we're going to be talking about Norman Bates and his mother, and how a boy's best friend is his mother, and how he killed his mother in a rage, in a jealous rage, because she was having sex with a man, and so on. So it sets up those themes. Actually, like, if you know where the movie's going, you hear some of these buzzwords in the opening scene. So even though this opening scene has nothing to do with Norman Bates, has nothing to do with any of that stuff, it already introduces some key themes into the film.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really good. So,
smart.
It's smart. Hitchcock movie smart? Whoa. Would never have expected that. Yeah, but that keeps going because she goes into work and this guy comes in and he's like, I'm buying a house for my daughter. She's getting married tomorrow. $40,000. And he mentions a really key detail where he's like, you don't have to declare it. I never do. That's why I get to keep it. So he sets up this reason, this motivation where she thinks she can get away with stealing it because he wouldn't want to go to the police because he's not paying his taxes. So he has to. So she makes that kind of gamble, and that's why she does what she does to an extent. Why she runs away with it. But this scene is really great. There's a great funny line from the other girl who works there that I really liked, who's just gotten married herself. Where after he leaves the room, she comes over and says, "Oh, he was really flirting with you. He must have noticed my wedding ring."
Oh, yeah.
I like that line a lot.
Yeah, I like her. She's funny. I think she also, has a joke about taking tranquilizers.
Yeah, she mentions she took tranquilizers, and her husband was really upset when he found out she was taking tranquilizers.
Which is, I guess maybe like they were like a newer thing back then. Maybe like people were taking them for like headaches or something. But it just sounds so weird to hear someone say that.
Yeah, and like, when I talk about one of the themes of the movie being like how men like treat or interact with her, like I'm not even 100% sure that it's saying something definitive about it. Like I'm not sure it's saying that, oh, like eventually she's going to encounter someone who's dangerous, because that's what happens, and it's like probably the least like suspicious one. Well, I mean, not to us because we're watching a movie, but the one who seems the most innocent in like a sort of face value way is the one who ends up being the dangerous psychopath essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas this guy comes on really strong with a cowboy hat, and he's like making all these things about you're pretty, blah blah, or whatever he says. Like and he seems like he comes on strong, but ultimately she knows what he is, and she kind of like navigates around him, understanding that he's the type of person that he is. But there's the other moments that was really sticking out to me in terms of this theme is after she does go on the run and she ends up having the scene with the cop who's very kind of like suspicious of her. There's a scene where she goes and swaps her car at this used car lot, and she is very hurried about it, and the salesman's a little bit suspicious because she's in such a rush. He wants proof of like that she owns the car and things like that. But as she drives off and leaves, and she's been very suspicious because she like almost forgets her luggage and everything else. The characters, the cop, the salesman, and I think it's the mechanic who works there, all three of them are just standing there watching her leave, like they're all under suspicion of her. And obviously she is acting kind of weird, so I mean it's not like it's unjustified, but it's kind of again the idea that there's like just this lineup of men all like paying attention to her and watching what she's doing, and scrutinizing everything she does. Throughout the film.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not super familiar with Hitchcock, but it does seem to be, I think something he's known for is just doing like paranoia really well, which like, all these scenes of her, just kind of like looking around and being nervous, and then hearing these voices in her head and everything. It's just it's like really well done. Just because you almost kind of feel like you're experiencing this like kind of like weird paranoia as well, and and it's kind of like justified too, because the people are definitely like looking at her weird, which of course it's because she's acting weird, but it helps you like definitely get in that like same headspace.
I think if you want to take it more of an analytical approach, you could say that it almost represents the like, because she clearly feels kind of weird and guilty about the relationship she has, that it's so secretive, that it's not something that she can talk about in public. And she maybe feels, for lack of a better word, dirty for it, essentially, and that she'll be judged for having this relationship. And it's almost like you could argue the rest of the way that the men treat her in the film, even though she is kind of justifiably reacting kind of strange and suspicious, is of a heightened version of like how she feels about being found out in a relationship, or how she feels as a woman navigating around men, and like the idea that if she does anything, she'll be questioned, it'll be preyed upon, she'll be gazed at, and that this is kind of a heightened kind of version of that. So I think that's really neat. And then you ultimately have to talk about the fact that when she does get to Norman Bates and she has this conversation, which is beautifully shot, like there's so much subtle camera work, the way it's shot, this conversation, because she meets Norman, he's very nice and introduces her to her room, and then asks to have dinner with her, and the one honestly my only negative in this whole movie is the fact that apparently they can hear conversations coming from the house down at the motel rooms, and I'm like, bullshit.
Yeah, that's true.
Bullshit. But so that scene where they're eating in the parlor behind the office, or behind the front desk, and she's sitting eating her sandwich or whatever, and they're having a conversation about various things about him and his mother and having friends and whatever else.
I do like the like you're saying, like they do have like a nice chemistry together, and I like when he's kind of inviting her to dinner, and just again this kind of innocent boyish like, oh geez shucks, like hey, I really would love it if you'd have dinner with me and everything, and it's
he can't even say the word bathroom. He's like showing her around the room saying, hey, there's some stationery, there's a phone, there's this, there's that, and then he turns on the light in the bathroom, and he's like, and he can't say it, and she's like, bathroom? And he's like, the bathroom, and it's just it's sort of how sort of like innocent and immature he's coming across, which arguably maybe lowers her guard in a way that she shouldn't. Which, by the way, it's worth mentioning, this is the first movie made in Hollywood that showed a toilet seat, so so Hollywood itself was actually quite pruddish about the toilet seat up until this point. Yeah, it's a really weird bit of trivia about this movie, but whereas you don't think about it now, you would never think there was a time when you couldn't show a toilet seat, but if you think about it and go watch movies from the 50s and 40s, you're like, oh yeah, there's no toilet seats in any of these movies. Okay. We can't show that, that'd be scandalous.
It's like one of those like weird things when they would show like a married couple's bedroom, and they always had like separate beds and stuff. Like.
Yeah, because even the fact that we start the movie with her lying in the bed and her bra, like with the guys, like, oh, this is kind of raunchy for the time period. So, but they have this conversation, and the camera work's really great here because it's, like all of his shots are kind of low angled and you can't quite see like his whole face properly. And more importantly, in the background behind him is like all of his stuffed birds. It's interesting that he went on to do the birds after this movie because there's a lot of bird themes in this one. But he talks about her eating like a bird, and the idea that the bird's always watching, they're kind of like hanging over the scene and just watching the entire time. Like there's a lot of really subtle things that kind of tell you that something's not quite right, that something is looming over the scene. And obviously if this is your first time watching it, you may be thinking, oh, it's his mother who's like looming and watching his every move, and that's what they represent. And in a way she is, just not literally. I guess you would say. But it's a really well done scene because her shot by contrast is a very clean shot that's very well lit, and she's leaning forward, she's engaging in conversation with him, she seems genuinely kind of interested, and she's trying to be friendly. It's very different to the way she talked to the cowboy hat dude who was buying the house, where she was constantly being kind of defensive. She was constantly making sure that she was under no circumstance giving out the signal of I am receiving this flirtation and returning it in any way. Whereas with Norman, she's leaning forward, she's happily asking more questions, she's listening to what he's saying. Even tries to give him advice when he talks about how rough it is with his mother being sick, and maybe even oversteps her bounds a little bit, but they connect. But it's dangerous because, of course, as we find out later, that if he becomes attracted to someone, that's when the mother comes out, when Norma Bates comes out and does some nasty stuff. But no, some of the scenes in this movie are just so rich with just how the camera's staging, how they're going through things. There's another shot later on. It's when the detective comes to the motel, and he asks to see the book, the sign-in book, and he's looking and he's like, oh, here it is, here the handwriting. This is kind of her boyfriend's name as a surname. This is clearly her alias that she's used. And Norman kind of leans in, and he sort of leans in like this to look at it, sort of like that. And it's a really weird shot because it's looking up at his chin, and it's all in shadow, and it's it's a really weird angle you never really get in movies of someone. But again, it's just this idea of being on the underbelly underneath them and kind of looking up at him. And that's another wonderful scene actually from him from a performance standpoint, where he's denying he saw her, and then he has to kind of walk back and tell the PI that he has kind of seen her, and he's like, oh yeah, she was here and she left in the morning and whatever. Yeah. But the performance completely the whole time is magical. He's carrying the scene. Not the other actor's bad. The other actor's great, but he's just all these little ticks, all these little things where he's getting nervous. Really good.
Yeah, there's definitely something about him that's very captivating. Just makes you want to watch him on screen. And I think another thing which, maybe I could be wrong about this, but I feel like most horror movies before this, maybe with the exception of Dracula or something, but usually the villain or the monster is a little more grotesque or ugly, and he's a very attractive leading man type who I feel like before this he'd probably be play a hero or something in a movie as opposed to being a villain.
And I think that's kind of the point. It's a surprise. It's unassuming. He looks normal. Yeah. Anyone could be a psychopath. That's kind of the point. Yeah. But no, he's great in the movie. Full of little performance beats like that. I think these are honestly the two standout scenes for him as a performance are the scenes where he's talking to Marion, and then the scene where he's hiding it from the detective. Obviously there's other scenes as well, and him reacting to the aftermath of the shower scene is really good as well. But so good. Yeah. So because he watches us through the hole, of course, the peephole that he's got in the wall. Which, as you referenced earlier, In the remake, they added an extra detail to this scene where Vince Vaughn masturbates as he's looking through the hole, which makes sense. But it works well enough in the original without it that it just does feel kind of like tacked on and kind of like
there really is no reason for it. Like it's definitely not something you can see or that you need to see. Yeah. Even if like you do assume that maybe that's what's going on, but
yeah. So, and of course, this is when his attraction's at its most highest. This is why his mother then comes out in his personality. We get the famous shower scene. We get, but I think what's notable here, just to go back to the story, is that Marion decided at the end of the conversation with Norman to turn herself in, to go back with the money, because up until this point in the movie she's been on the run with this money. She's constantly looking at it, she's constantly feeling the pressure of being cut out, and she wants to go back and make it right. And as we find out later, they don't even want to like arrest her, like, you know, because again he's not wanting to go to the cops. He sends a PI because he just wants the money back. He'll basically forgive it if he gets his money back. She makes the choice. She says to Norman, I was kind of running from something, but I'm going to go back and face it before it's too bad. And she's made that choice. And I think it's interesting as well that it's the conversation with Norman that inspires that choice. Hearing him talking about things and like not making a change or not trying to like make it better inspires her to make that choice for herself. So it's a really neat touch. But I think, what do you think of the fact that she's on the run, she's nervous, she's paranoid about everyone around her, all the men around her, but it's after she makes the choice to do the right thing that she's killed? It's not like she's punished for doing the wrong thing. She is killed after she's made the choice to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of what you usually see in horror movies. Because I guess maybe it becomes like a trope later on, but it's the idea of like, like in slasher movies or something, it's like, like once you break a rule, like you have sex or whatever, or do a drug, then that's when you get killed. And here it's kind of the opposite, where she starts off by breaking the rules, but then is killed once she does the right thing, which I guess maybe like a lot of things in the movie is just a nice little like subversion as to what you would normally think would be the case or what should happen.
Yeah, I think the movie is just playing a lot of subversions. There's a lot of things you expect, I think, that don't happen. Obviously not now, but the first time you watch it, you might expect that, her sister and the boyfriend might fall for each other in the second half. There's not even a hint of that. You might expect that. What else might you expect? But there's lots of things that you might expect because there's kind of tropes that the movie doesn't do. If you wanted to read into it a little bit more, you can maybe. Nature's not the right word, but the idea that this is genuinely quite random. It's not like she's not being picked because she did something wrong. It's not like later slasher movies where all the bad characters are the ones who get killed because there's some sort of like weird karma or something going on. It's more like no, that killer can strike anyone. So the person you think is your main character is killed halfway through the movie, which is really bold.
And it's like I could probably be wrong about this, but it seems like this is kind of around the time where maybe like serial killers were becoming more of a thing, and like people were maybe starting to be a little wary of like strangers and like hitchhikers and those kind of like myths and stuff starting to turn up. So just this idea of like being at the wrong place at the wrong time, where because like I feel like maybe the 40s and 50s kind of had this like Leave It to Beaver kind of thing where like like we're all communities and everyone knows each other, and you can just walk into someone's house and be like, hey neighbor, how's it going, like and it kind of seems like this might be around the time where it's starting to pop up things that like, oh no, like maybe not everyone is your friend and maybe we should be a little more wary of strangers.
The idea that there's horror hidden in home and in your home. Yeah. No, I mean that's very much what the movie is, and it's obviously worth mentioning. I guess
that goes back to kind of your kind of first point where we're taking the horror away from the gothic castles and mad scientist laboratories, and instead it's just this little place off the highway. It's this stranger you haven't met. It's lurking all around you.
Yeah, exactly. And we should mention at this point, since we're talking about serial killers, the character is loosely based on Ed Gein, who is a serial killer, who obviously also went on to kind of inspire portions of Silence of the Lambs and also Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So obviously a very notorious killer if he's inspired three of the biggest horror movies of all time. This idea of someone what I like about it is that different elements of what Ed Gein did inspired these different movies, because obviously this movie doesn't have any of the making like furniture out of like human bones and skin or anything like that, but it does have the grave digging, digging up the bodies, and keeping the corpses around or whatever, and I say that having it's been a while since I've like watched the documentaries on it or anything. All the knowledge I had about Ed Gein's went out the window. But
I think the big things that they took for Psycho was the like keeping the corpse around, and while he definitely isn't like wearing human skin, but there is an element of dressing up and pretending to be your mother.
Yeah, it's not literal, but he does pretend to be her. So yeah, that makes sense. But shower scene itself, should talk about some of the notable scenes in the movie.
I guess the shower scene is like, the first really big horror scene. Like before, there's maybe like, there's thriller and tension stuff, but this is kind of when it's like, full on horror. And again, it's like you had some very elegant things to say about like the shots and stuff before, which is good when you have like a someone that's studied kind of film production stuff, because I can't really talk about it in those terms. I can just say like, oh, it looks pretty, but I mean the shower scene though, I think even if you don't study that kind of stuff, you can still kind of appreciate it on a technique level. It's just the way it's done and kind of what it shows you and doesn't show you, and it's one of those things where I do think in your head it does feel like gorier than it is, but there really isn't like any blood. Like you never actually like see like the knife penetrating her, and you don't really see like that much blood.
What's funny is
in it.
Hitchcock claims that there is a couple of quick shots where you can see the knife touching her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. But it doesn't feel like you do. You're right. It doesn't feel like it. I love how it starts though. I loved seeing the shadow of, or not shadow, but seeing seeing him sneak up on her, like behind the curtain. I really like that, and even another little detail in the shot that I like as well. And part of this is to frame it so you can see like the person coming through the curtain, just the sort of the shadow as it were. But she's very low down in the frame. She's there's a lot of headroom above her. There's a lot of space. She's kind of in the corner. It's a really weird framing. Typically, you don't frame people like that in a shot unless you're doing something really specific artistically. And it kind of made her feel small in the shot. Like she's genuinely like not aware of the world she's in. She's not aware of her predicament, and she's ambivalent to it. And because of that, she's screwed. And sure enough, she does get killed. So.
And it's also like another thing too, where talk about like being in one of maybe a place that you would typically consider to be very safe. Like already we're talking about like being like in like a hotel or a motel or whatever. You think you would be relatively safe there, but then the actual shower is something where you never really are concerned like someone's just gonna like bust in there and attack you. So it's when you're at your most vulnerable, like you're completely naked, you're wet, you don't really have anything to defend yourself, and you just kind of take for granted that nothing bad's gonna happen there.
No, it's a really well done scene. So many shots went into it as well. If I remember correctly, I think I read that of the 30-day shooting schedule, like almost a full week was spent on this scene.
That makes sense.
Which is insane. But I've really put a lot of thought into it. Other big scenes. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, and then it's interesting too. So, I guess we still wouldn't know that it was Norman that did this right away. But like talking about before, like, his scenes with the cops and stuff. And it's just kind of funny if you juxtapose those to earlier in the movie with Marion, where, like, she's acting very weird and nervous around the cops, and just how different Norman acts when he's around them. Like, he's very cool and collected, and
not even just acts. Like, if you compare the scenes with the cop in the car, and like whenever he talks to her, like, it's all these big tight close-ups on his face, on her face, like everything's very in your face. When the PI's talking to Norman, it's just like a casual two-shot. It does have some nice little touches when it shows just Norman. Again, it's the low angles, and it's they almost really want to emphasize his Adam's apple. Every time he swallows, you can kind of see him, swallow properly. But so they're even shot differently, so you get completely different experiences in both scenes.
And I guess what the next big one would be the death of it's a private investigator, I believe, when he's at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, he comes snooping. He's not satisfied with what he's heard from Norman, so he comes snooping into the house because he wants to see the mother. And he's just kind of slowly snooping around. He's going up the stairs, and obviously it's partly to conceal who it is, but I do love the over the head shot of Mrs. Bates. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like running out and stabbing him at the top of the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've never been like super in love with the fact that the shot of him going down the stairs is so smooth. It should feel bumpy, but
it is weird. Like, it looks cool, but there's something that's kind of weird about it.
Yeah, that's one of those things that just feels a little bit dated, but like it's still a really effective scene. Like, everything about it, I love. And
it's really cool to see how Norman as Mrs. Bates, how she whatever moves, just because because he's obviously already pretty old, so you think his mother would be really old, and then just like the way she's dressed and her hair, like you imagine her like very old woman, but whenever you get a shot of her, she's like running so fast, and like it's just it's very interesting to see, because even if that moment you still think it's an old lady, it's like, wow, she can really move.
Yeah, there's all any little tricks as well, because we actually get a scene where, because the PIs went missing, the sister Lila and the boyfriend Sam Loomis, who, if you're recognizing that name, is because Samuel Loomis from Halloween was named after this character. Cool. they try and figure some stuff out. He goes and checks out the motel and sees the mum in the window. They go to the sheriff, finally thinking, okay, we have to get help with this. They wake the sheriff up, and he's talking to them, and he mentions seeing Norman's mother in the window, and the guy's like, what? That's not possible. Norman's mother's been dead for 10 years. And obviously this is the first big hint, right? Of like, oh shit, like, what's going on here? But it's right after this. There's a scene where Norman, you hear Norman arguing with his mother again. We've heard him do both voices before, but it's the same shot at the top of the stairs looking down. But he actually, carries her out, and we see him, carrying a woman down the stairs. Obviously later on we find out this is just her corpse, and that she's dead, but it does a lot to dispel, and again the shot's off from above, so you can't see the mouths moving, so you can't see who's speaking, you can't see that it's him doing both voices. So it almost like sets you up for like, wait, the mother's dead, there must have been going on, but then it gives you this thing to disprove the idea that, oh no, someone's there, there's clearly a woman there, like, is this someone he's kidnapped? Is this something else going on? Like, your mind wanders. So really good. And then of course they eventually do try and sneak in themselves, and this is kind of the big climactic ending, where one of them sort of distracts them. Loomis distracts them whilst Lila goes in to check things out. Sneaks around, sees some odd things like his teddy bear and whatever else, other weird things he's got going. And then finds the corpse of the mother in the basement, screams, which triggers Norman with his wig on and the dress coming in to kill her. Luckily, Loomis jumps him from behind and grabs him, and de-escalates it, but that's kind of your big ending moment.
Yeah, and such a good reveal on the corpse, and when she kind of like hits the light and it's going back and forth. And it's just really, really cool effect on it.
Again, it feels very dark for the time period. Like this corpse just sitting there, this skeleton, essentially. And to his credit, because I feel like when you see a skeleton in movies this old, typically you get the really cartoony, like just white skeleton.
Like it's just bones, yeah.
Whereas this actually looks like a corpse. So, at least as good as they were going to get in 1960.
Yeah.
So no, that's really good, and I like how it emphasizes the twist. Just in case you didn't get it, you see the wig fall off, and you see him with his own hair. Like, so it's just in case you didn't recognize him immediately, it makes it very clear that this is who it is.
And it's like a really good like expression he does in his face, where it's like, he's just giving like this tormented, like kind of stretched, like almost like animalistic kind of thing, where you haven't seen him acting this way at all, before in the movie. Like, his eyes are so wide and stuff. It's very cool. very, very, very good acting on his part.
Yeah, that's very neat. Let me ask you this, Tim. How do you feel about the scene, basically the final scene before we see Norman, where a psychiatrist walks us through
kind of like the whole movie?
Yeah, he basically explains everything. Probably too much. I don't know if so if I have two complaints about the movie, my only two complaints is everyone seemingly being able to hear conversations from the house, even though it's up a little hill and it's like, behind closed doors and whatnot. And it's this scene maybe goes too far with just how much it over explains things. That said, though, I guess you have to look at it in the context of the time period. I'm like, all these ideas that he's telling us, we've seen done in movies. We've seen done in movies and TV shows. We understand the concept of split personalities. We understand the concept of just all these ideas. Does an audience in 1960, do they need this to be explained as much as this? They might do. I don't know.
They might have. It definitely does feel dated and tacked on by modern standards. Like, it's totally fine to have, maybe someone do like a little recap or whatever. But yeah, it definitely goes on like way too long. But yeah, I think at the time, like, people might just be like, so like, wait a minute, why was there a guy in a dress? That's something that could never, ever happen. Like, it might be something that they would need a little bit of explaining on.
Yeah.
But I think at least, though, I think maybe it was kind of a good move, though, that's not just where the movie ends, because the next scene is phenomenal. Like,
there's the final scene of Norman sitting there, and we hear the narration of the mother. And that final smile as he looks at the camera, really good, really unsettling. Technically there's one more shot. There's a shot of the car being pulled out the swamp.
Oh, right.
Yeah. When you think of the final scene of Psycho, you're thinking of that shot of him smiling. That's the moment. I think one of the things that makes this movie so good, apart from just how well it's directed and the kind of the shock factor of the various things that it's doing, is just how good the dialogue is and how back and forth it is. Marion's a character who's a very quick speaker, whether it's because she's being charming in one scene or she's trying to like get things done quickly, like the car salesman or whatever. And then likewise, the PI, Arbogast, like when he's talking to Norman, or even talking to Lila and Sam, he's a very quick talker who it's got a flow to it. When he's talking to Norman, he keeps interjecting things with like, so there it is again. Yeah, you said no one had been here, but you just mentioned this couple has been here. And then it gets Norman kind of stuttering, and it's got this kind of rhythm to it because he's very confident and sure of himself. So the PI keeps talking very kind of smoothly and in a rhythm. It's really good. And then as soon as he makes his point and he hands it back over to Norman to say the next thing, Norman hesitates. And there's a lot of great little character in there. There's a lot of smooth dialogue going back and forth between characters, and it tells us so much about who they are very quickly. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in Psycho, Tim?
No, I don't know. It's sometimes it's just a little harder to talk about these classic movies because they are so classic. It's like, it's kind of like, what else do you need to say? Like, there's a reason why it's has this legacy and is lived on and is studied, and people talk about. It's just, it's really good. It does, it has very talented people working on like all sinister, on all cylinders or whatever the
cylinders
phrase is. Cylinders.
All cylinders.
It's a horror podcast. I'm thinking sinister. But no, I mean, yeah, it's great. There's a reason why it lives on, and yeah. I don't really have much else to say about it. I feel like there's a lot more, elegant takes on it, other than my just being like, oh yeah, it's good. Sure.
No, I mean, sometimes the classics can be rough because like you feel like everyone's said everything already. What the hell do we have to add? And that's where, like, having seen it multiple times, I start thinking about themes, and that, I started thinking about how Marion interacts with all the different men in the movie and things like that, or think about what maybe it's trying to say, if it is trying to say anything, which I don't know if it necessarily is. I think it's just a really well-made movie about its premise, and the point is to be shocking and be like, hey, like, anyone could be dangerous, is kind of the idea. So I like that. It's got great performances, it's got great cinematography, direction is exceptional. It stands the test of time. It's a goddamn masterpiece. It just is. And without this movie, there is no Halloween. There is no slasher movies. And I wouldn't call this a slasher movie. Like, I don't think it is, but I don't think slasher movies exist without Psycho first. Yeah. It paved the way. And I know Peeping Tom was about the same time, so it wasn't like there was nothing else that was trying to do, more modern takes on horror at the time, and more kind of in the real Western world kind of idea. Psycho's the bigger of the two because it's the better made of the two. And I've not seen Peeping Tom in a long time, but I do remember liking it. It wasn't a bad movie. Very good even, from what I recall. But Psycho's the one that kind of just broke the mold and says, this is how shocking we can be. And while none of the things it does now would be shocking now, really, you can kind of, like, in the context of watching movies from the 50s and the 40s and then watching this, you can kind of feel this leap forward. This would have freaked people out at the time. Yeah. Whereas now, I mean, we've seen, how many corpses do we see in a movie or a TV show on a weekly basis? Like,
well, that Rob Zombie movie, there was 1,000.
I've never seen it, but was there literally 1,000 corpses, Tim?
I don't know. Probably not.
I'm like, questionable. But we are going to do the whole franchise, all 4 movies, over the course of the month. So this is just the beginning of the Psycho franchise. And arguably, talking about how the sequels handle taking the story forward and following up on Hitchcock might actually be a very interesting conversation. So maybe more interested in this one, because this one is just like, Psycho's amazing, and here's why it's amazing, and nothing to really make fun of because it's Psycho. And if we're getting to ratings, Tim, it's a 10 out of 10. I'll say mine first. I never do that, but it's a 10 out of 10. And for anyone who's going to poke holes at it, but you had a couple of small complaints, I'm like, yeah, but to me, a 10 doesn't mean it's perfect. I don't believe in a perfect movie. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to go a little lower, but I mean, I wouldn't argue your score, but I think ultimately what it comes down to is, it's a classic. I recognize it. I think, I don't know, maybe since I don't know about as much as, about Hitchcock and maybe the time period and the film techniques and stuff, maybe there's a level I don't appreciate it as much as other people, but I mean, I still get why, it's good and there's a lot of cool stuff in there, but I think I'm just going to go with an 8.5 for me.
You're lucky. That's just above what you give the boy. Lucky. Although, I should be offended anyway. Saying Psycho's only half a point better than the boy is kind of like madness. Absolute madness.
Well, I mean, in the words of Ma, there must be something wrong with me.
But no, I mean, I love Psycho. It's one of those things where I think I've liked it more every time I've seen it, because I
I start noticing little things, and I mentioned the bird imagery. Obviously, there's the taxidermy. There's the line about eating like a bird. When Norman goes into the shower and sees the body and he reacts, he backs into the wall and knocks over a photo off the wall. That photo is of a bird.
Okay.
Or it was not a photo, it was like a painting of a bird, but whatever. So that's the idea that the birds are always looming. So again, really funny that he wanted to direct the birds as the next movie, because there's a lot of bird imagery in this. You can let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments below. You can support the show and everything we do here on Patreon at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. We can support us for as little as $1 per month, and for that $1 per month you get access to an exclusive bonus episode every month. So it's a bit of a back catalogue that's built up over most of the year now. We're actually doing 4 bonus episodes for Octoberthon, so patrons are getting a lot of value for this month. But you can
let's just say we're also going to be doing going all the way through another series that maybe as equally beloved as Psycho.
Not a chance in hell is it equally beloved as Psycho. But you can check that out. And you can, of course, subscribe. You can review the podcast on your Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use, because it helps spread the show around to more people. But that is it. So again, it is the Octoberthon, bunch of episodes. The whole idea is to make you feel like a marathon all month. And this is hopefully going to be the biggest, most packed episodes ridden month yet. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching the scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.